We have a lot to pack in into the rest of this afternoon, and I hope everybody enjoyed your respective workshops. And now we have a very exciting panel to present to you. I know it's something that's on everyone's mind, and it's around managing a healthy workplace in a hybrid environment. I think everyone is affected by this issue in some capacity. This session will discuss how leaders can boost morale and productivity when they show they care and respond with empathetic and effective solutions. This panel will be moderated by Kelly Yamanouchi, business reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So please join me in welcoming Kelly and the expert panel.
Good afternoon. This is such a great panel of speakers with a real variety of perspectives from different parts of the industry, and I'm really excited about the discussion because the hybrid workplace is here. More than 90% of employers plan to adopt a hybrid working model for their knowledge workers this year, according to the Harvard Business Review. But we also know there are so many dynamic forces to consider when we're talking about how to manage a hybrid workplace while prioritizing health and wellness. So it's a really important issue, and I'm looking forward to the discussion to learn about the latest thinking and ideas. So first off, I'd love if each of you could introduce yourself. Let's start with Bria.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bria Griffith. I am the Inclusion and Diversity Leader for Honeywell Building Technologies and Honeywell Connected Enterprise. Honeywell is a huge conglomerate. We really do everything. So I'm excited to be here with everyone.
Hi, Wendy Whittington. I am the Chief Care Officer at Cariloop in Dallas, Texas. We are a caregiver support platform and service.
And my name is Cierra Boyd. I work for Cummins Inc. as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Communications Leader. Cummins Inc. is based in Indiana, but we are a global company that prides itself on powering things from engines to generators, you name it.
I am Davida Rivens, and I'm with E4E Relief. We are a company that partners with companies to help support their employees in times of need, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hi, I'm Jeri Hawthorne. I am the Vice President of Corporate HR for Aflac. I'm guessing most of you know us know of Aflac for our duck, but we are the largest supplemental insurance provider in the US and in Japan.
So what a great group. So first question, it's a big one. How does hybrid work look at your company, and what do you think are the biggest challenges of a hybrid workforce? I'd love if we could start with Jeri.
Sure. So it's funny when I think about it. I was telling Kelly earlier, so Aflac is headquartered in Columbus, Georgia, and about probably 75% of our employees in the US are based out of that location. And so prior to the pandemic, our workforce mix was about 80% on site, and then 20% that remote kind of hybrid mixture, I would say. As we are in our return planning, we've done a complete flip where we have about 55% of our workforce that will be 100% remote, and 45% will be a combination of hybrid and on-site. And so it's a big cultural shift for us as an organization as it relates to helping leaders to maneuver through when everybody was on site, managing was a certain way. When everybody was off-site, it was consistent, and now it's a mixed workforce. And so how we support and help them in engaging and managing their employees and giving them equal access to development opportunities, those are some of the biggest challenges that our team, I would say, faces in helping and supporting our leaders. It's been really unique in that we have thought a lot about how do we evolve our benefit offerings now that we are in this mixed environment. One of the benefits that came out of all of this was that anybody who joined Aflac who didn't want to come to Columbus, Georgia, had a pretty short leash from a growth perspective, because you had to move there at some point if you were going to go up in the organization. That's where we had the best benefits: on-site daycare centers, on-site fitness care centers, on-site healthcare centers, and a number of other things. With the hybrid environment and the mix of our workforce shifting, we're looking at how do we better level the playing field for those types of perks and benefits so that all of our employees have access to things that are in demand, that are competitive, and that are important to them in this hybrid environment.
Cierra, tell us what it's like at Cummins.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I actually joined Cummins as a remote employee. And so to your point, one of the things that it's really helped in this environment is create opportunities for not only the company, but for talent to be able to bring their expertise in ways that may have been limited for that employer based on where their location may have been. So at Cummins, because we have a dynamic group of employees that make up our Cummins family, from our shop floor employees and technicians that are still having to operate and be on site in our plants, to some of our corporations and headquarters and our other offices, where we have it as a choice at this time, where if you do meet the requirements that, we are encouraging vaccinations, we are asking for our employees to come and have their mask on. It's not something we're mandating that we fully open, but we do allow our employees to have that choice to be in an office if they choose to at this time, or if they desire to work from home. And given that I am based in Atlanta and I contribute to the company globally based out of Atlanta, and I just travel when it makes sense, it's really helped with my career growth, our retention overall within this environment. As I have a 1.5-year-old, one on the way, I'm glad that I can be able to make impact and be at this state of my career, as well as impact the company the way I desire, not feeling that I'm limited if I don't relocate or if those opportunities aren't here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Bria, what is it like at Honeywell?
So again, Honeywell is a very large corporation, over 100,000 employees globally. In the US, we have 4 hub cities. So we moved headquarters to Charlotte, North Carolina. We have some businesses that are headquartered in Atlanta, Houston, and Phoenix. So one of the things that we actually just recently rolled out, keeping in mind that we do have this global workforce, right? So COVID is still very much a thing. Restrictions and regulations across the board are different depending on what country, what piece and part of the world that you're in. So we decided to go as flex as we possibly can. So, Honeywell has a 100-year-old tradition. So it's very hard to turn a traditional ship, right? And so a lot of the work that we did was actually going to our employees and asking, what works best for you all? There are plenty of people who are like, I never want to go in the office again. I don't even know what an office looks like as far as I'm concerned. And then there are other people who are like, I miss, my coworkers. I miss some of that collaboration. So we rolled out a program to do just that, kind of, help the pieces and parts and keep the work moving forward. And so we have a hybrid model. So for our hub cities, you can choose your days, but basically whatever days you want to go into the office, you can go into the office. And we're keeping in mind mask mandates, social distancing. And so that also allows us, technologically speaking, to monitor how many people we have in the office at a certain time. We've also decided to do what we're calling flex hours, where you can work when is most beneficial to you, right? So if you're a caregiver, you're a person who needs to, use your daytime hours to caregive and your night hours to work, then you're absolutely, working with your manager, you can do that. And then lastly, we've implemented a job share program. So for example, if one of my colleagues and I do the same type of work, so we're both in diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and it works better for her to work in the daytime and it works better for me at nighttime, then we can do that, so that the shared collective, the work still gets done, right? But we can still work around each other.
I love that.
So this panel is already showing us a lot of innovation that's going on. I'd love to hear what are 1 or 2 of the most interesting ideas for new programs for the workplace that can address some of the challenges that have emerged in the last 2 years. And if we could start with Davida.
Absolutely. So everybody started doing wellness programs more significantly. You probably were already doing them, trying to do yoga classes and things like that for your employees, but it became very intentional during the last 2 years of the pandemic. Out of that, one of the things we saw happening also was companies setting up employee relief programs. The number of companies that were trying to establish a foundation or a public charity to be able to provide financial assistance to their employees increased significantly. Even the number of applications the IRS got to be able to do that. But of that, something interesting that I hope we'll hear from Cariloop on with Wendy is that we saw childcare coming to the top of the types of needs that people were requesting assistance for. Traditionally, it had always been housing, utilities, those types of things outside of a disaster. But we noticed that childcare, just people needed it. What was happening is they were losing their traditional sources of childcare. Centers were closing either due to capacity or outbreaks, and they needed assistance with financial grants to find other ways to pay for. You know, if you have children, you know that you don't get that money back if they close. And so it was creating a financial hardship for those employees. And if you had childcare on site, you're no longer going to the office. You had to find other solutions to do so. And an employee relief program was one of the innovative ways that companies were able to cover those types of expenses.
I'm so glad, Davida, that you called out childcare as caregiving,
Yes.
right? Because before the pandemic, I mean, we were all still taking care of our kids, and it was hard, but we were working and doing that. But the pandemic just really, was one positive thing that happened. There was this big light shown on all of those struggling parents at home. So it's not, I'm just a parent, or no, my kids don't have any special problems, so I don't need that support. That is not the case at all. We all need the support. The pandemic just really, again, shined that light on it. And the education support part of that too is huge. So thank you for bringing that up.
Any other ideas that you all would like to share?
I mean, I would say, Ed, Aflac, we've done some innovative things. So we had an employee relief fund prior to the pandemic, and it would be for emergencies. So if someone's, had a house fire or, something kind of tragic, they could apply and get relief through that. We also have a group of, they're all women, oddly enough. We have a group of employees that are called employee advocates. So I joined Aflac in 2019 and was told about this group called employee advocates, and I kind of tried to reconcile what it is in my mind, and I thought, well, is it sort of like a modern day ombudsman? I mean, I couldn't really get there. But what it is, it reports to me now. Oops, excuse me. It reports to me now, so I have a huge affinity for it, obviously. But it's a resource for employees that is, a person. We have for all of our employees, we have 7 advocates who are available, and they solve problems. Anything from I was in the lactation room and it's too cold in there. How do I get that fixed? To, hey, I'm having a problem with my coworker. We just don't get along. It's not really anything I need to raise to my leader. To very recently, we've unfortunately had a couple of instances where we've had employees who have lost family members, employees who have had addiction issues, employees who have talked about having suicidal tendencies. And this group is kind of that first line of, who do I go to? I don't know where to start. So leaders, I don't know where to start to help my employee with this. And employees, I don't want to talk to my leader about this because it could impact my job. I don't want to talk to HR about this because it could impact my job. I don't know what to do. Who can I talk to? And when we first started, they were on-site visibility. Physical visibility was important. They were walking the floors. They were, it was. We made it a priority that they were in the line of sight of our employees, and we were a little worried during the pandemic that the value would diminish, and what we actually found was the opposite. So, we actually had employees saying, well, I never used to go to so-and-so because I felt like if I did, everybody knew that there was something that was wrong, but now I just call her. And, this group of women sort of became, almost, I hate to say a 24-hour hotline, but they were getting phone calls at a variety of different times in the day and evening in order to help solve some problems. And they would bring individual challenges forward and kind of help solve or liaise to find the solution, because they aren't the experts in everything, certainly. But they were also a great line of what's the pulse of what's happening in this group? So what's the pulse of the employees? Because employees would share more anecdotal feedback with them because they trusted that we would get, that they would get a resolution in a good way. So that was actually something that we did that I think has been a massive, massive benefit to our organization.
It's a really interesting model. So let's hear a little bit about the role of ERGs in today's workplace. What role have employee resource groups played in the remote or hybrid workplace? And let's start with Cierra.
Yeah, so just as a reminder, I lead the communications for our diversity, equity, and inclusion. And part of my role, I'm really there to really enhance and amplify our global strategy toward creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment. And one thing that I've seen us do at Cummins, which I hope all companies begin to do, is we're very much leveraging our employee resource groups. They may be called business resource groups wherever you are, or affinity groups, but it's us really making sure that we are leveraging their voices. We are amplifying their platforms, and they've done a lot for us within this hybrid environment and in this remote environment. I can say, for example, with our Cummins Black Network that represents our Black employees globally, we've been able to do so many platforms and programs this month alone for Black History Month that I've heard verbatim from our employees saying it re-energized them. It really helped make them feel connected and have the camaraderie and collaboration that you sometimes miss when you're not in person. And with this month's Black History National theme being Black Health and Wellness, seeing that our company was able to have the yoga, a yoga on Mondays, or even they invited an African dance teacher that was able to get everyone to get on camera actually and practice some dance moves and have a competition, and just to see, you know, our teams represented across the globe that took time out of their day just to join this particular affinity group that I'm speaking on, to really just enhance some of our caring culture that has been missed with an in-person setting. It's been very much dynamic. And so I would certainly encourage you to really amplify those employee resource groups and to really make sure that we're giving them the platform that they deserve and bring them to the table when it comes to some of the programs, and hearing from their groups on what we may not need from our either place of privilege or our leadership roles, that really allow us to hear from our people, from senior leaders down to our employees, to know what they need. And that's been very useful and impactful for us at Cummins.
So whenever we're thinking about new ideas, there's a lot of factors to consider. So I'm wondering what potential programs for the hybrid workplace you all are currently working on or considering, and what are the needs that you have to balance? Let's start with Bria.
A couple of things. So I'm going to continue this thread with employee networks and just how to leverage them, quite frankly. I see we call them employee networks, right?
Oh, I love it.
Our employee networks really are our ambassadors for inclusion, and they really are a resource for our organizations to understand, both from an affinity standpoint, so whatever that particular affinity group is, but also from an allyship point. And I think that's really critical when we're talking about inclusion. And so one of the things that, a couple of things that we're rolling out. So at the end of last year, we implemented a new concierge benefit service that focuses on mental health and wellness. One of the things that, COVID, the pandemic, has absolutely brought, to everyone's attention is that we're not all having the same experience in this pandemic. And different communities are having vastly different experiences. So from health disparities, who's having to caretake, who's not caretaking, generational differences, like all of these things have created, quite frankly, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of addiction, things that probably existed pre-pandemic. They've just 100% been amplified, right? So within those employee networks, we're able to get a pulse, like what's happening, like what's going on, what resources are people needing. And so the concierge service was one thing that we rolled out to not just to go beyond our the EAP, right? So like everybody has their insurance, and you go through your insurance, and hopefully you find a therapist or a clinician. The concierge service is really there to give some more specialized care. So even if it's, a dependent, right? So like maybe my kids are really going through it, or, my nieces and my nephews are really going through it. How can I, help them navigate in the space? because we also realize that communities of color, so I think the statistic right now is about 1 in 5 Americans are dealing with some type of mental health challenge. It's 1 in 3 in communities of color. Wow. And it gets worse the more marginalized a person is, right? So when you start thinking about intersecting identities, so veterans, and suicide rates among these populations, I think it becomes, just tantamount, quite frankly, for organizations to pay attention to the fact that diversity, equity, and inclusion doesn't work if you're not thinking about all those things. So equity is making sure that the imbalances in the systems and structures get removed. Inclusion is making sure not only do people feel like they belong, but you're creating the environments in which they do their best work.
Yeah.
Mental health is key to that, right? So I can't show up and do my best work if I'm not taking care of my mental health and wellness. And so those are just a couple of things that we're doing right now. A part of it too, like I said, is just leaning into those employee networks and asking, like, what's happening, what's going on, what are you seeing in your communities, your neighborhoods, the places that we're doing business, where are blind spots? We know this, so sometimes, it's the whole push for all of us is to get to those leadership levels, right? But you lose a lot when you start to get to the top. And so what are the blind spots that we're not seeing, the everyday things that are happening in people's lives? Because Honeywell is such a conglomerate, we are working on healthy businesses. We are transforming the way people do work. I mean, we partnered, when the pandemic happened, to ramp up production for masks. That was one of the things that we did. We also know, right, that in communities of color, these resources aren't available. So it's not good enough to just go ramp up and sell masks. How do we get those masks to the people who need them the most, right? How do we, when you're thinking about the hospitals in which we do business, the security systems, the fire alarms, so all of these things that we're putting in these places, how do we solve for equity in the space too? And how do we utilize our employee networks to do that very thing?
Yeah.
Let's dig a little bit deeper on the unusual needs that have arisen during the past couple of years. What are the biggest needs that employees have right now, and what do you see as potential paths to address them? If we could start with Wendy.
It's so great that I had kind of a lead up on my left and on my right to this question already. Folks are seeing it. The caregiving issue is huge, and it's also a diversity, equity, and inclusion issue because, we know, yes, that communities of color have suffered more with the mental health issues, as you state, but caregiving itself is a huge burden, and caregivers have much higher rates of suicidal ideation. We could go on and on. So caregiving, right, is the big answer. It was there before the pandemic. 53 million Americans are a caregiver for an older adult or a child with special needs. 73% of your workforce before the pandemic identified as caregivers. So it's just really great to hear others talking about it. It's a big one, and it's not that difficult to support them.
I think when I hear Bria talk about that as well, one of the things that comes to my mind is I was having a conversation with a very C-suite level executive at a company, and he goes, none of my employees have those issues. And he's like, no one's come to me with those in the last 3 years. And I kind of stopped and I was like, would they come to you? And it was like you were saying, it doesn't make it to that level. You become a little disconnected the higher you go. And one of the things that I think it's really important is that while it may be childcare, there may be mental health issues, there are other things that just feed into this overall. And so when we start stepping back and saying, all right, all of these things are impacting our employees in certain ways, we start to say, well, what can we do that is going to have an immediate impact? And so we did some polling, and we saw that 48% of employees were having stress about finances. It could be coming from childcare. It could be causing more mental health issues. So if we can figure out how to solve for some of those things, we know that it not only makes your employees better, it makes them more productive. Because of that financial stress, companies are losing over $500 billion a year in productivity. That is a direct impact to your bottom line. So it makes sense for companies to care about your employees' financial wellness. If they can't pay a utility bill, if they're worried about how they're going to pay for childcare or college or whatever the case may be, and oftentimes, it may not be their own job they're concerned about. It could be someone in their household who has lost a job. And that is a blind spot for many employers because you won't know about that necessarily. So I would say, I don't want to top childcare and mental health, but finances are a big deal. And it's something we've got to make sure we're providing the right type of programs for, whether it be savings, helping them eliminate debt. I met with one of the, the vendors out there. There are so many ways that we can approach this. And while it may not feel like our responsibility, the well-being of our employees is, and we've got to think about all of those types of programs. So I'd throw that out there.
So the one common thread that I've heard sort of all of us talk about is just the evolution of the role of the employer, right? So, during the pandemic, there was all of this research around how people trusted the view of their employer more than the news, more than the government, more than publications, et cetera, because things were so polarizing. And so it's fascinating as an HR professional to see how organizations, 15 years ago when I would talk to leaders, it would be like, you manage them while they're here. They're here during this window of time, you manage their performance, what they do at home, as long as, it's not violating any massive rules, like that's none of our business. And so this connectivity and intersection of the whole person with the employer and our responsibility with that it's new. And my observation is that some of us were figuring out a little bit as we go, right? So it's that there are more and more programs that are being offered. We've been in a time of trauma as a world for the last couple of years, so it's very obvious and heightened, but employers are struggling through the how do we do it programmatically, but the frontline leaders, they are probably struggling the most because it's a complete shift in how we have taught them to engage their employees, to say it's okay to call them. It's okay if you have not heard from them in 2 days, call us and we can have a wellness check at their house. We can have our health services reach out and do an evaluation if you think that they might be depressed or that something might be happening. And so it's really this evolution, which I think is a good one, honestly, because I think that it had gone so far the other direction where, we expected people to be robots in a little bit, then it was you come in, you do your job, you go home. But we're definitely rotating in the other direction to positive benefits, because I think it impacts the communities as well as it's good for the employer, but it's also good for our communities where we have our employees today.
It's so interesting, to hear you say that, because what happened for our children was the education system and their schools became that resource. Like they had to step up. I saw buses delivering packages of food to those who didn't, in those food deserts and things of that nature. And then employers are being expected to take care of us adults. And so we're trying to find those industries or those systems that have the resources or the things in place to be able to do that. And so employers are a natural fit to make sure that they're taking care of their employees.
Yeah.
It's really interesting on kind of the shift of lines between business and personal. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that question of how the act of managing has changed. How do you manage different expectations between managers and employees at a hybrid workplace? For example, if managers want a return to in-person work and employees prefer remote, which we're seeing a lot of course.
I think we all laugh a little bit about that because my assumption is that probably most of you have senior executives who are making comments of, I can't wait to see the faces, I can't wait to get them back to work, and we keep saying, they're working. By the way, productivity was very high during the pandemic. So, this is not a butt in seats. Well, I think, Bria, you said that. This is not a butts in seats exercise. This is an output exercise. And so, it's an employee's job market. We all know that. We're seeing turnover rates at Aflac that have been, they're historically different than we've ever seen. And so what we've tried to guide leaders is you need to be flexible where you can with people. People want to be treated like adults. They want to be grown-ups. If you can give them the flexibility, if they can work from 8 to 1 and then they pick their children up at school and they log back on at 4 or 5 o'clock, as long as the work is getting done and there are no negative impacts, why do we care, right? Why do we care? Why do we care if they're sitting in this box? And so our guidance to leaders has been be as flexible as you can, manage performance as consistently as you can, base it on outputs as opposed to, I had a conversation with a leader yesterday and he said, I've never had to manage to the skittle. And we switched to Microsoft Teams. I don't know if you all have that, and it's got the red, green, yellow, gray skittle. And he said, Jeri, he said, I haven't used that. And he said, my skittle's been gray for the last 24 months. And he said, so if we were managing by that, we would assume that I haven't done anything. Yeah. And so again, it goes to the treating people like adults and giving them the flexibility to ebb and flow as they need.
Yeah, for sure.
I also wanted to ask about the role of wellness programs and financial well-being and overall employee morale. I'm interested in both, how employee morale is affected by people who use wellness programs and financial well-being programs, but also does it affect people who aren't yet using those programs or who are not currently using those programs? Davida, let's start with you.
Well, let's start with those who may not be using them. I think it's nice to know that there's something out there in case you do need it. It makes you feel like your company's already thinking about needs that might come up. So there's that. That's really a positive in that regard. And for those that are, we know that they feel more connected, they feel more supported, they're able to turn more of their attention to work because they're getting supported. And when you feel that way, you can I don't have to worry about that. I think you said, I don't have to spend hours looking for, a caregiver. Someone's done that for me, and now I can focus on my workplace. And when you talk about how that impacts an employee, knowing someone's got your back, knowing someone's trying to help you out, allows you to be able to focus, and it makes you feel like, oh, this company cares. And when you start to show that you care, they want to give more to you. They don't mind spending an extra 30 minutes. They don't mind, picking up that or responding to that email at whatever time it might come through, because they know that you've given them that flexibility. They know that you respect their time when they are stepping away and things of that nature. And so I find it to be very meaningful from an employee perspective to know that someone's there with you and you're not going through this alone.
And can I just add to that, that last line that you mentioned, I think sometimes we forget the power of trust and just feeling trusted to do your work, trusted to make right decisions and have discernment that's going to add impact to your company. And I think that's very important in the workplace. It breeds vulnerability that helps with mental wellness and health, so you can feel that you can go to your supervisor, you can ask questions to your leader and get the right support so that you can be more productive in your job. So I do agree with that.
Great. Yes.
So I'd also like to ask about inclusion and diversity and what the role is of inclusion and diversity in overall well-being in the workplace and how you've seen that surface in the last couple of years.
Yeah, so I don't think that mental health and wellness was ever traditionally tied to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but yes, right.
Right.
Like these things absolutely have to go together. You can't get the inclusion part if you are not thinking about people's mental health and wellness. So I think the collective experience of going through a pandemic just amplified all of these things to everyone, right? So we figured out as employees how to get work done, how to support our coworkers, how to show up for our customers and our clients. We figured out how to do all of those things, all while still managing households, ordering groceries because we couldn't go in the store, all of these things, that the ways that we had to pivot in this new world of a pandemic. And I think too, because of that, it gave everybody an opportunity. So it's the blessing and the curse of a pandemic. It gives everybody the opportunity to slow down and really start to evaluate and think about, it's an employee market now, right? So the first great resignation happened when there were tens of thousands of women who left the workforce. And this was well before now, right? Left the workforce, I can't do it, too much going on, I need to refocus my priorities. Now those women are returning, but they're returning with very specific requests. And so, and I think that largely has to do with the fact that during the pandemic, we were all doing it, right? So self-care, right? So self-care Sundays, I'm doing my own nails, I'm doing my own facials, right? I'm brewing tea, all of these habits and rituals that we started to implement that that we really didn't pay much attention to, like, right? Like, yeah, we would have a spa weekend with some friends every now and again, but now people are really centering whole self, right? And I think whether employers want to or not, they don't have a, like, we're there, right? So we've made that shift. And so as people are thinking about the visions for their careers, where they want to go, the types of companies that they want to work for, mental health has to be centered. Like, you have to look at everyone coming into an organization as healthy, whole beings, so that you can create inclusive workspaces, so that you can get rid of the imbalanced systems and structures that are in place, so that the representation, which is the diversity part, matches the communities in which you do business in. So I think we've crossed the threshold now, because employees are going to ask for it. They're going to look for the benefits. Where are the caretaking benefits? I don't just want a gym membership. What else do you have, right? Like, I don't just want a discount on a Headspace app. Like what else is happening, right? I need to know that you're actually considering me. I need to know that the leaders that are leading all of these teams are taking the entire team into consideration, knowing that some of us may be single, some of us may be married, some of us are caretakers, like all of those things, right? And that's the inclusion piece of it. We have to get to know each other in order for me to know, like, well, okay, why didn't Cierra come to the meeting? Because we know this happens, right? Like, so oh, I didn't see Cierra on camera. Like, what is that about? Well,
Why are you picking on me? No.
right. You know, but like, we know this happens, right? And so it's giving people the tools, the language, the skills to know that she may not be on camera because she's changing her child, right? Or she may not be on camera because she needed to take a break, quite frankly, right? Right? Sometimes you just need to take a break, but we now have to switch our language. I mean, pre-pandemic, I really did not hear people talking about mental health and wellness in the ways that they talk about it now in the workplace. And again, that's the blessing and the curse, right? So the blessing is we're talking about it. The curse is that we've lost a lot of people. And I think employers are having to pay attention to that too, right? So we've lost colleagues. There were people that we used to be on teams with that we're not anymore because they're not here anymore. So you cannot ignore those things, because my friends at work, you know, absolutely affect my mental health at work. The fact that I can't look over and see this person anymore affects the way I get my work done. So I think we've crossed that threshold where all of this is entwined. Like, we are humans, we are trying to have a common experience, and the respect that is necessary from employers is just that, to respect the whole person.
Yeah. And if I can take it one layer deeper, you know, you think about all the stressors that you just mentioned, and then you add on microaggressions, if you already having an experience in that, depending on what dimension of diversity you belong to. You add on feeling underrepresented, not seen, and you have to play into that the psychological impact that brings as well. When you don't feel included, you don't feel that you have a voice at the table. And when more companies realize that the two aren't separate but very closely connected, then you realize that it is going to promote productivity, power innovation, because not only your employees see themselves and feel as though that they can bring ideas to the table, they can challenge the status quo, then you will never realize that when you add on feeling underrepresented, the microaggressions and other mental stressors that plays when you aren't seeing fair outcomes where you are, then that adds so much of an impact to your day-to-day work. And so it's important that we are creating cultures of belonging and welcoming, and we're making room for everyone to be seen. Everyone can feel that they can bring their whole self to work, because I know I do. I don't always look like this. I got pretty for you all today, but I'm not on Zoom all the time. And while I may say it's because I'm changing a diaper, that's not really the case. I'm over it. So I think it's very important that we're able to have real conversations in the workplace. We saw where we were as a nation during the racial reckoning in 2020. We saw what that did and how that impacted the entire globe. And so it's just important that we get very real. We cut the crap and we realize that the two, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as mental wellness, all plays a part. And our employees want to see themselves. They want to feel that they can be authentic no matter who they are, what they bring, and what group that they belong to, because we're all one family.
And the one point I'll add is that, so we all work for companies. We all, they have to be profitable. They need to make money. And I think, Davida, you hit it. Like, the business benefits are real. So like I can talk to my CFO about the value on a human level all day long. And he's going to look at me and say, we're in a cost challenge. And so unless you can show me the benefits over time, either from a productivity, an increase in sales, or a savings, I don't know. So the financial benefits are real. The financial benefits of having diverse teams and managing those effectively, the better decisions that come from that, the benefits of having engaged employees who feel supported. So just to arm yourself with that information. If that's the one sort of like piece of advice, so I would say arm yourself with the data.
Yes.
You did a great, you were like this percentage.
Yeah, I knew those.
Yeah, and I'm not that good. I wish I had done that. I didn't. But it's important because, these are corporations, they have shareholders, we have to show returns. So arm yourself with the data because there is a business case for doing the right thing.
And I think, and I'll quickly add that, so that the business case is attrition, right?
Yes.
So I
And
would,
productivity.
yes, exactly, the cost of attrition, right? So that's what I would tell the CFO.
That's right.
So for every employee that I'm replacing, we're having to spend thrice as much to bring somebody back in, right? So if we're not taking care of the whole person, if we're not paying attention to the macro and microaggressions that happen in the workplace, if we're not creating employee networks that help with inclusion and belonging, if we're not spending the money up front, you'll spend it on the back end.
That's right.
Yes.
Right, and so that's really the business.
That's a
end.
great, yes.
Agreed.
So that's a good, strong financial point to end on. And I learned a lot during this session. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. So thank you so much to our speakers.
Thank you.